Hey guys, it's Raul again, and today I'll be sharing with you part 2 of the books that I read last semester. So this video is going to be focusing on the books that I read for my 19th century novel class and one other book that I read for my American literature course. There were a lot of other books that I was supposed to be reading throughout the semester for like American literature and for one other class that I just did not enjoy at all, so I was relying more on skimming and spark notes to try and get general information on these novels that I didn't actually end up finishing. So I'm not going to include any of these novels in this video or anything because I didn't really read them in its entirety. So these are the 19th century novels that I ended up completing and reading in its entirety. So those are the ones that I will be talking about in the second half. I did film another video of the books that I read for my children's literature course, which I will link down below, which at this point has already been posted. So if you guys want to watch that and see the first half of the books that I read, you can go ahead and check that one out after you watch this one. I won't be breaking down this video like I did with my children's literature course because this one is just all 19th century novels. The one main concept that I reminding myself over and over when reading these ones are how these books were challenging viewpoints at the time. If you were to read these books and compare them to modern times now, a lot of them will be problematic. For example, we read Pride and Prejudice. If you were to read that in a modern context where it's all about marriage and marriage is the important thing and women aren't allowed to inherit, in modern context, obviously it's problematic, but how they were affecting their time period within 19th century, how they were challenging, social norms at the time. So that's the main thing that you kind of have to keep in mind when reading 19th century novel. Obviously, it's you can't compare it to modern times. You have to compare it within the context that it was written. Now, the first novel that I ended up completing, which just so happens to also be a 19th century novel, but it was for my American literature course, was Washington Square by Henry James. This one was actually a really, really fun book. This was probably the only novel that I ended up completing in its entirety throughout my American literature course because I wasn't really enjoying the stuff that we were reading for that class. We read a lot of excerpts and poetry and stuff from other ones, but we were supposed to read 3 novels in its entirety, Washington Square being one, but then we also picked up Death Comes for the Archbishop by Willa Cather, which I didn't enjoy and just spark notes it. And then we read Absalom Absalom by William Faulkner, which for those of you who don't know, is one of the hardest novels to read in American literature. And reading it at the end of the semester was just way too much, so it's another one that I just spark notes to get the gist of what was going on. But this one I actually ended up reading its entirety because it was really, really fun. It's super, super short. It follows our main character named Catherine, who falls in love with this man named Morris Townsend, and throughout the entire novel you're kind of trying to figure out whether Morris has the best intentions with Catherine. I mean, Catherine is set to inherit a very large fortune when her father passes away, and you have this man, Morris, who doesn't have a job, who has a very shady background, who all of a sudden comes into Catherine's life, and they fall in love, and Catherine's madly in love with him, and he's apparently madly in love with her. But you kind of constantly are questioning whether or not he's really there for the money or not. And that, I think, is what kept me intrigued throughout this entire novel. Me and everybody else in the class, we were all intrigued in knowing what was going on, what were Morris's true intentions. I thought this was great, funny, and witty at times. We ended up watching the movie after we read this one, and I also really ended up enjoying the movie adaptation of it, although obviously I preferred the novel, but I really enjoyed kind of that intrigue that you have throughout with kind of somewhat of the humor and the wit that's kind of weaved through there, because this novel, I feel doesn't take itself completely seriously. But you do have this main character, Catherine, who's definitely going against social norms and going against the things that her father wants for her. I feel this is going to be also a novel that's going to be extremely polarizing with people. You're either going to love it or you're going to hate it because of how things play out. I'm in the side that actually ended up loving it because it wasn't the typical kind of 19th century love story that a lot of people are, expecting. So I loved the fact that it was so different. And I really, really recommend this one if you guys enjoy classics and stuff. This is definitely one that I recommend just because it's so short, and that way you can get kind of another perspective of how love stories can somehow play out sometimes. The novels that I read for my actual 19th century novel course, we read 5 novels that I actually ended up reading in its entirety, and I really loved most of the novels that we read for 19th century novel. The first one was Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. This is a book that I'm not going to get into too much detail because I feel a lot of people are very, very familiar with Pride and Prejudice. I had watched the movie version of this, the one with Keira Knightley. I'm not sure what year it came out with, but I had watched that movie years ago, so I was familiar with the story and everything before I had gotten into the book, but this is the first time I had read anything by Jane Austen, so I was pleasantly surprised at her comments on society at the time, how Elizabeth Bennet was definitely going against social norms. I mean, you have this time period where women don't really have the right to do a lot of things, and unless they marry, they're kind of, basically screwed throughout life because they have no real aspirations of what they can do. I mean, if they don't get married, it's not very likely that women will end up having a great life because they don't have that financial support. Unfortunately, women at this time weren't able to inherit kind of family money or property or anything, so she had to marry. And having a main character like Elizabeth kind of go against those and refuse marriage from not one but two different people throughout this novel was definitely a comment that Jane Austen was making at the time, really trying to focus on what true love was instead of making marriage seem more like a business transaction. And I really ended up enjoying those concepts throughout. Next semester I'll be taking an entire course on Jane Austen. We'll be reading her six novels that she wrote, so we'll be reading all of Jane Austen's books and analyzing her as a person and all of her texts and everything. So I'm super excited about that after, being familiarized with Pride and Prejudice. Finally, like I said, I really ended up enjoying this one. Then after that, we read Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, another book that I feel like a lot of people are very familiar with. But this follows our main character, Lockwood, as he starts to uncover the history of Wuthering Heights and the people who lived there, and it's just very messed up. I mean, a lot of people this is another one that people end up kind of loving or hating because of the characters. This is definitely that book where it's just, I've heard of it described as bad people doing bad things, and it's definitely, I feel, accurate when it comes to that, because these are just very, very unlikable characters doing very unlikable things throughout the entire thing. And I feel like there are very little redeeming qualities throughout this novel. But for, again, 19th century, Emily Bronte writing something like this was just very, I feel, groundbreaking and very different for this time, where she's writing about all of these characters with very intense emotions and very kind of harsh opinions on themselves and the people around them. And it's just like, it's absolutely crazy. There's so many problematic things also throughout this book that, for like modern standpoint, it's very disturbing, some of the elements within this novel. But again, it's one that goes against a lot of the norms of this time, which is why it was so memorable. And I really enjoyed this one. I mean, this is definitely a book that I want to try and reread at some point, because the first time reading through some of these novels, so many things just go over your head. And unless, you're in this class environment where everyone's kind of commenting and analyzing together, it would have been really hard for me to grasp some of the things that were going on within the storyline. But I'm glad that I was able to read it within this classroom context, because I was able to understand the story and some of the elements a little bit better. So, which is why I want to end up rereading this one on my own after having talked about the entire text, so that I can pick up on all of these different things and stuff, because I really enjoyed the writing. I loved the atmosphere, especially at the beginning. I just completely was immersed within this book from the very beginning, and then I kind of lost it halfway through, and yeah, so another reason why I need to reread this one, but I ended up really enjoying this one. The next novel that we read was probably my favorite one of 19th century novel course, and that was Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. I absolutely loved this novel. And this follows our main character, Pip, who ends up acquiring this large fortune and moving to London and all of these different kind of aspirations to become this gentleman and get this, girl named Estella to finally fall in love with him. And I think it was just a very, very beautiful book. Another book that comments a lot on society, that definitely shows kind of the good and bad things about society at the time. Charles Dickens does an amazing job at kind of painting these great stories, making these books very, very vivid and very descriptive, where you can just kind of imagine everything that's going on in your head. Everything is just clear and wonderful. I love Charles Dickens' writing. I had never read anything by him before and just absolutely ended up falling in love with his writing style and with this story like as a whole. I loved this. Is another kind of like unconventional type of love story where it might not always be completely happy, and it's just, I thought it was wonderful. Another one that has problematic elements, especially when you're introduced to a character like Miss Havisham, who's just creepy and weird, and I ended up absolutely loving this character. But another one that, you know, if you compare it to today's standards, it's problematic, and there are a couple things that are disturbing, especially her relationship with Estella, and but I just still ended up falling in love with all of these things and the imagery throughout. And yes, this is definitely one of my favorite classics. I definitely want to try and reread this book every year because I loved it that much. And then the next book we read was Miss Marjoribanks by Margaret Oliphant. This was probably my least favorite book of the course, just because I don't feel like it was doing many new things. I have the main character, Miss Marjoribanks, who's a socialite and is kind of using her status within society to kind of manipulate everyone around her, ends up kind of like learning the error of her ways later on and stuff. But it's all about society, all about kind of social class, which is definitely the intent, I feel, with a lot of 19th century novels, is to go against a lot of social norms. But this is another one that I just like, I don't know, I just feel like it wasn't doing anything new. After reading the first 3 novels and this being the 4th one, it just wasn't completely different. I mean, it was more lighthearted than it was. Like, you definitely have a lot less like problematic elements and disturbing images and stuff. I feel like this one didn't really have any of those disturbing problematic elements. So it was definitely a lot lighter, but this was the longest novel that we read. So I mean, having this novel focus so much on like social class and what this woman can do within her kind of rights within society and with the power that she has within her home, because she is from like higher class means and stuff. It's just like, it wasn't something that I ended up absolutely loving. I mean, she was going against society. She was going against some of the things that society wanted her to do as a woman and stuff, which I enjoyed, but still not one that I ended up loving. This was not one that was, you know, completely memorable. And I really just like struggled with this one as a whole. I mean, I guess it's part of a series. Margaret Oliphant did write kind of this standalone series where each book follows kind of a different character within this town, and this one was just the one about Miss Marjoribanks. But I don't know, I don't think I'm going to read anything else by Margaret Oliphant, because if the rest of her novels is anything like this one, I don't know. It just didn't really grab my attention as much as I wanted it to. And the last book that we read for 19th century novel was Test of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy. This is another one of probably my favorite novels that I've read. This one deals with our main character, Tess, and kind of her life struggles. This is very, very dark. There are definitely trigger warnings with rape and rape culture. I mean, this is basically what this whole novel entails, is rape and victim blaming. And I feel like this is one of the only novels that we read in 19th century novel that continued to be somewhat relevant today, because unfortunately, you know, the topics of rape and rape culture and everything are still prevalent today. It's stuff that we're still talking about. It's stuff that society still kind of views, especially with victim blaming and everything. And then having Thomas Hardy write this novel and really highlight kind of the negative aspects of victim blaming and how it affects this young girl's life by being blamed for something that wasn't her fault. I feel it's powerful. I mean, this is just a wonderfully written novel, like very atmospheric, but very, very hard to read at times. I mean, it was so hard to read that, you know, one of the things that our professor was talking about is that the publisher actually made Thomas Hardy change a lot of the things within this novel. I definitely feel like this is one of those novels that, again, people are either going to love or hate for what it's worth and for what it's trying to tell. I feel like it's definitely a very important novel, and one, like I mentioned, that is still relevant with today's society with all the themes that it's talking about. But some people, just be warned, some people are going to love it, some people are going to hate it. I loved it. I loved the way it ended. I loved kind of that the author went there. Like, there were certain things that I wanted to happen toward the beginning of the novel, and I just like thought it would never happen, and then it did, and I loved it. I loved the fact that the author went there. I love the fact that the author definitely pushed boundaries when it came to these kinds of things. Thomas Hardy was definitely known for pushing the boundaries when it came to his storytelling. I mean, he pushed so many times throughout some of the other novels that he wrote that he got so angry that he stopped writing novels because people weren't appreciating the things that he was writing. They weren't appreciating, critics were just completely bashing him for not writing traditional type novels. But I mean, why would you want to continue to read traditional stuff over and over and over again? Like, these are the kinds of books within 19th century, within classics, that definitely stand out when, you think about 19th century novels and you think about classics and stuff. This is definitely one that's going to stand out to me. I mean, definitely one that I want to end up rereading, even though it has harsh themes in it and everything. It's definitely one that I feel should be read at least more than once, at least twice, to kind of get a full feel of what the author was trying to do and how important these topics were to highlight. So yeah, guys, that is it for part 2 of the books that I read last semester. So that is everything. I feel like I'm caught up now at this point with everything that I've read throughout the semester. There are a couple of other books that I managed to read for fun, which I'll just do a separate video on. And then after that, I'll hopefully be caught up with all of the books and the wrap-ups and everything, because I haven't done a wrap-up in a while. So yes, there's one more video with the books that I read for fun that I'll at some point end up posting. So yes, just keep an eye out for that one. Comment down below. Let me know what your guys' favorite classics are, favorite 19th century novels are, because I would love to get some recommendations on more classics that I should read. So thank you guys all again for watching, and I will see you all next time.